He was a billionaire CEO who rejected every woman until a blind lady touched his heart. What happened next will leave you in tears. Stay tuned because you're about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. Christopher Hayes was not just another man in New York City. He was one of the most powerful billionaire CEOs in America. His name opened doors in business, and his face was on every magazine cover. Tall, handsome, and always in a tailored suit, he carried an aura that made people stop and stare. Yet, behind all the wealth, all the respect, and all the admiration, Christopher carried something else, an empty heart. From college to boardrooms, women tried to win him over. Some came with beauty, some with brains, others with charm. But Christopher always shook his head. "They want my last name, not my real heart," he told his personal assistant once. "They want the life I built, not the man I am." It wasn't arrogance. It was pain. He had once opened his heart to a woman who betrayed him for money and fame. Since then, he built walls, high and strong. He didn't believe anyone could love him without a hidden reason. So, while the world saw him as a man who had it all, Christopher saw himself as a man who lacked the one thing money could never buy: true love. One late evening, after a long board meeting, Christopher left his skyscraper office. The city was glowing with lights, taxis honking, and people rushing home. But for the first time in a while, he didn't hurry to his car. He felt restless, as if something was missing. As he walked past the busy street, he noticed her. A young woman, standing still at the crosswalk, holding a white cane. Her long dark curly hair framed her soft face. Her eyes were closed, not because she was resting, but because she couldn't see. Christopher paused. Cars zoomed past. People rushed by. But she remained there, waiting calmly, with a small, peaceful smile on her lips. Something about her silence pulled him in. Without thinking, Christopher walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said gently, his deep voice steady. "Do you need help crossing?" The young woman turned her head slightly, her smile growing. "Yes, please, thank you, sir." Christopher offered his arm, and she held it softly. Together they crossed the street, step by step. It wasn't a long walk, but for Christopher, it felt like a journey that touched something inside him. When they reached the other side, she let go of his arm. "You have a gentle voice," she said quietly. "I can tell you are a kind man." For a moment, Christopher froze. No one had ever said that to him, without knowing who he was. No mention of money, no praise of his success, just gentle and kind. He wanted to ask her name, but she was already walking away with her white cane tapping lightly against the ground. Christopher stood there, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He didn't even know her name, but something told him this meeting was not by chance. For the first time in years, the man who had said no to every woman whispered to himself, "Who is she?" And deep inside, without realizing, Christopher's heart had just begun to say yes. Christopher could not forget her. That night, lying in his penthouse with the city skyline shining through the wide glass windows, her soft words kept echoing in his head. "You have a gentle voice. I can tell you are a kind man." It was strange. Millions of people had spoken to him before, in meetings, interviews, even romantic dinners, yet not one of their voices remained in his heart the way hers did. He didn't even know her name, but something in her smile, something in her calmness, had touched him. The following week, Christopher's car passed by a small neighborhood park. As he looked out through the tinted window, his eyes caught sight of a familiar figure sitting alone on a wooden bench. Her long curly hair, her white cane resting against her leg. It was her. "Stop the car," Christopher ordered his driver. He stepped out and slowly walked toward her. She was listening to the sound of children playing, her face lifted slightly, as though she could see the sunshine she could not. "You again," he said softly. She turned, her smile blooming. "The kind voice," she whispered. "I was hoping to hear it again." For a moment, Christopher's guarded heart melted a little more. They talked. At first, just simple things, the weather, the sound of birds, the taste of coffee from the nearby cafe. But soon, she began to share her world with him. I may not see the colors of the flowers, she said, but I can smell their sweetness. I may not see the laughter on children's faces, but I can feel the joy in their voices. When you lose one sense, you learn to love the world differently. Christopher listened like a child hearing a story for the first time. For years, he had judged women by their looks, their wealth, their ambition. But here was someone who couldn't even see him, yet she made him feel seen for the first time in years. Days turned into weeks. Christopher kept visiting the park and the little cafe nearby, always finding her there. Her name, he learned, was Mirabelle Carter. She lived alone in a small apartment and worked part-time helping at a center for blind children. Though she had little, she was rich in kindness. Mirabelle never asked about his life, his money, or his position. She only asked questions like, "Did you smile today? Did you get some rest? Do you feel at peace?" Questions no one had ever cared to ask him. Christopher started opening up, something he hadn't done in years. He told her about the long hours, the stress of leading a company, and the loneliness that no mansion or a luxury car could fill. Mirabelle listened patiently, nodding gently. "Then maybe you need less noise and more quiet," she said one evening. "The world shouts, but the heart whispers. You must learn to hear it." Those words stayed with him long after he left her. One afternoon, as they sat together at the cafe, Christopher finally asked her, "Mirabelle, don't you ever wish you could see again?" She paused, holding her warm cup of tea in both hands. Then she smiled softly. "Sometimes. But I've learned to see with my heart. That never lies." Christopher stared at her, speechless. Her blindness should have made her weak, yet it made her stronger, purer, more beautiful than anyone he had ever met. That night, Christopher Hayes, the billionaire CEO who had rejected every woman, knew something with certainty. He didn't just admire Mirabelle. He was beginning to love her. Christopher did not sleep the night he realized the truth. He loved Mirabelle. By morning, he knew he could not hide it any longer. He found her in the park, sitting on their usual bench, listening to children laugh. "Mirabelle," he said, taking a slow breath, "I need to tell you something honest. You have changed me. I don't just admire you. I love you." She held her white cane tighter. "Christopher, I'm blind," she whispered. "You deserve someone whole." He shook his head. "You are whole. Your heart is the purest thing I've ever known. I'm not leaving." A soft silence followed. A bird called from a tree. The wind touched her hair. "I care about you too," she said at last, her voice unsteady. "But I'm afraid. People will talk. Your world is loud. Mine is quiet. Then let's build a home where your quiet and my loud can live together," he said. "We'll go slow. I'll prove it with my actions." Christopher kept his word. He learned how to guide her arm the right way. He walked at her pace. He placed small raised labels on her apartment cabinets, salt, sugar, tea, so she could reach them faster. He bought a talking clock and set it beside her bed. He took off his suit jacket and helped at the Center for Blind Children where she worked, sweeping floors, reading stories, and laughing with the kids. When she said she loved jazz, he invited a small trio to the cafe after closing. They played softly while she held his hand and felt the rhythm through her palm on the table. When she asked, "Are you smiling today?" he learned to answer honestly. "Yes, because you're here." Or, "Not yet, but I will be, once I hear your voice." Days turned into weeks. Trust grew, quiet and steady. Still, some nights Mirabelle worried. What if I slow you down? What if the world mocks us? Christopher would squeeze her fingers. "Let them talk. I'll be busy loving you." One evening, he spoke gently. "Mirabelle, may I ask something important? Only if you want it." She tilted her head. "Ask." "I found a team of doctors who think they can help your eyes. There are no promises. But there is hope. We would go only if you are comfortable." She was silent for a long moment. "Christopher, do you think God could give me sight again?" "I think God already gave me you," he said. "If he opens this door, I will walk through it with you." She nodded, tears on her cheeks. Then we try. The next week, they met Dr. Emily Parker, a calm, kind specialist. Tests showed scars on Mirabelle's corneas from a childhood infection. There's a chance, Dr. Parker said carefully. A corneal transplant could help. Success is not guaranteed. It may take time. There will be pain, medication, and patience. Mirabelle held Christopher's hand. I'm afraid. He brought her hand to his chest. Feel my heartbeat? I'm here. Christopher covered every cost, quietly, without press. No cameras. No headlines. Just love. He stayed with her through every scan and every needle. He read the consent forms line by line, then read them again, explaining each part in simple words. He called her pastor, Pastor Grace, who prayed with them in the hallway. The night before surgery, Mirabelle said, "If this doesn't work, will you regret it?" "Never," he answered. "I didn't fall in love with your eyes. I fell in love with your soul." Before dawn, a nurse wheeled Mirabelle toward the operating room. Christopher walked beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "Tell me 3 sounds you love," he said softly. She smiled through fear. "Children laughing. Rain on a roof. Your voice when you say my name." He bent close. "Then remember them. And remember this. I'm not going anywhere." The surgery began. Hours felt like years. Christopher paced, prayed, sat, stood, and prayed again. He called his board and moved his meetings. The world could wait. She could not. At last, Dr. Parker stepped out, eyes warm above her mask. The surgery went well. Now we let the eyes rest. Bandages stay for some days. No bright light. No pressure. We wait and we hope. Christopher exhaled. Tears he didn't hide. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you." The days after were slow and tender. Christopher learned to make her favorite tea just right. 2 minutes steeped, 1 spoon of honey. He spoke in calm tones. He read aloud. Poems, prayers, funny stories from the children at the center. Sometimes fear visited at night. Mirabelle would say, "What if I open my eyes and nothing changes?" Christopher would answer, "Then I will still be here in the morning. And the morning after that. And every morning after." He brought fresh flowers and described their shapes. "This one looks like a soft trumpet. This one like a tiny star." He became her eyes and words, careful, patient, kind. At last, the morning came. Mirabelle sat on the hospital bed, hands at her lap, bandages ready to be removed. Dr. Parker stood beside her. A nurse dimmed the lights. Christopher took Mirabelle's hands and whispered, "Whatever happens, I love you." She nodded, breathing slowly. "Whatever happens, I'm not afraid because you stayed." Dr. Parker began to unwrap the bandages, layer by careful layer. The room grew silent. The last strip of bandage slipped from Mirabelle's face. For a long moment, she kept her eyes closed, afraid of what she might, or might not, see. "Take your time," Dr. Parker whispered. Christopher knelt in front of her, his hands trembling as they held hers. His voice was gentle but firm. "Whatever happens, Mirabelle, remember this. You already gave me sight. You taught me how to see with my heart." Her lips shook. Slowly, she opened her eyes. At first, the light made her blink rapidly. Then shapes began to form. The white of the hospital wall. The faint blue of the nurse's uniform. And finally, the face of the man she had only known through his voice, his touch, his patience, his love. Christopher's eyes were wet with tears, his face calm but nervous. Mirabelle gasped. "You," her hand reached up, trembling, to trace his cheek. "You're the man who never left my side." Christopher smiled through his tears. "And I never will." The entire room held its breath. The nurse cried softly. Dr. Parker covered her mouth, smiling. Mirabelle leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. Both wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of a miracle. The weeks that followed were like a dream. Mirabelle woke each morning astonished by the world. "The sky," she whispered one morning, holding Christopher's arm at the balcony of his penthouse. It's endless. He kissed her temple. And you're seeing it with me. She laughed when she first saw flowers, cried when she saw children playing at the park, and clung to Christopher when she saw her reflection in a mirror. I can finally see me, she whispered. But more than that, I can see you. Every day she reminded Christopher why he had fallen in love with her, not because she could now see, but because her heart remained as pure and kind as before. One evening, Christopher invited her to the same cafe where they first spent hours talking. The tables were covered in white roses. The musicians who once played jazz were back again. He held her hand, nervous for the first time in years. Mirabelle, he said, his voice deep but shaky, I once rejected every woman who came into my life. Not because they were unworthy, but because my heart was waiting. It was waiting for you. Will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes. She didn't even look at the diamond ring he offered. She only looked at him and whispered, yes. 1,000 times yes. The cafe erupted in cheers. Strangers clapped. The musicians played louder. And Christopher kissed her, sealing a promise that had begun the day he helped her cross the street. Their wedding became the talk of the city, then the nation, and soon the world. It wasn't the expensive flowers, the grand ballroom, or the glittering gown that captured hearts. It was the story. A billionaire who said no to every woman. A blind lady who melted his heart. A love so strong it gave her sight. On the wedding day, Mirabelle walked down the aisle in a flowing white gown. She carried no cane this time. Her steps were steady, her eyes locked on Christopher waiting at the altar. When the pastor asked, "Do you take this man to be your husband?" she smiled through her tears. "Yes, because when I lived in darkness, he became my light." And when Christopher was asked, he answered without hesitation, "Yes, because she saw my soul long before she ever saw my face." The crowd wept. The cameras flashed. When they kissed, it felt as if heaven itself leaned closer to watch. The reception sparkled with music, laughter, and joy. Guests from across the world spoke not of riches, but of love. Newspapers wrote, "The wedding that proved true love still exists." That night, Christopher and Mirabelle danced slowly under a ceiling of lights that looked like stars. He whispered, "This is only the beginning." She pressed her head against his chest. "As long as I can see your heart, I'll never be blind again." And so it was. The billionaire, who once rejected every woman, finally said yes to the one woman whose love opened his eyes forever. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you find this story worth watching. If you do, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thanks for watching.